What if the first firework of Independence Day was not light in the sky, but the sound of bone shattering beneath an axe? Imagine it. July 4th, 1834, Kentucky. While crowds lifted their glasses to liberty, 9 men of power prepared to taste their own mortality. They had gathered to celebrate freedom, yet kept chains clinking in their basements. They toasted to independence, yet crushed every whisper of it in the throats of the enslaved. That night, beneath banners of red, white, and blue, another banner was raised, painted in blood. The kind of blood no historian dares describe, because once spoken aloud, it stains the tongue forever. You are not meant to know this story. It was buried, erased, exiled into silence. But silence, my friend, is brittle, and on that day of supposed freedom, it cracked open. Out stepped a man they called Isaac. Some say he was a slave, flesh bound to another man's command. Others whisper he was not a man at all, but wrath made flesh, an old spirit wearing human skin, summoned from the soil where broken bodies had been left to rot. Whichever you believe, the truth is heavier than either tale alone. The planters of Kentucky thought their wealth eternal. They believed their names could not be smeared, their blood never spilled, their sins never judged. They believed fireworks were louder than chains. But Isaac showed them the opposite. He did not write speeches. He did not lift petitions. He lifted an axe, and with each swing he wrote a scripture no church would bless, but every slave would remember. That night, liberty was not toasted in golden halls. It was carved into flesh, one strike at a time. Do you feel it? The unease crawling across your spine like cold iron? That is the weight of dangerous knowledge. Once heard, it cannot be returned. Tonight, I will take you through the silence that cracked on Independence Day, through the mass, acre they hid, through the whispers that survived in shadow. This is not just history, it is a ritual, and by listening, you are already part of it. The sun of that July day burned cruel and merciless. Kentucky fields shimmered with heat, tobacco leaves wilting under the weight of a sky that felt more like a furnace than a blessing. The white planters gathered in their finery, their wives draped in lace and silk, their children rehearsing the cruelty of their fathers in smaller, sharper forms. They believed the day was theirs alone, an inheritance of freedom secured with muskets and parchment, defended by bayonets and blood not their own. Yet even as their laughter echoed across the Mason estate, something older waited in the shade of the slave quarters, something that did not laugh, something that did not forget. Isaac moved among them unseen, a servant, a shadow. He poured their drinks, he carried their trays, he bowed at their mockery. But behind his silence burned a different flame, the kind that does not flicker, the kind that does not tire. Some said he had once been broken, beaten with chains, branded with irons, whipped until flesh peeled like bark. Yet others whispered he had never broken, only bent low, waiting, gathering the weight of every lash, every theft of breath, every scream smothered in the night. That kind of waiting changes a man. That kind of waiting creates a blade sharper than steel even before the axe was in his hand. As the sun bled into evening, fireworks began. They rose into the air, bright flowers blooming against the dark. The planters cheered at the sky, proud of their spectacle, blind to the one forming at their very feet. Isaac slipped away from the circle of their laughter, his steps silent, his breath steady. By the woodpile rested the axe, ordinary to them, extraordinary to him. A tool for chopping timber, they thought. But in Isaac's grip, it became scripture. Not a weapon of chaos, but of order, an order the planters had long feared but never named. Balance. The first scream tore the air not long after. It silenced music, shattered laughter, drowned the false sky with something truer. By the time the second followed, the planters knew freedom was not theirs alone to claim. Isaac had begun his work, and with each stroke of iron into flesh, history itself was rewritten, not with ink, but with blood. And you, yes, you, are now hearing the words they erased. The The question is whether you can bear them. The first body fell in silence, save for the dull thud of flesh against polished oak. A planter named Caraway. His throat opened, his boasting cut short mid-sentence. His wine-glass shattered beside him, spilling red that mingled with the deeper crimson spreading across the floorboards. For a heartbeat, the guests thought it part of the performance, some grotesque jest to crown the fireworks. But when Isaac's axe lifted again, dripping, and his eyes shone with something older than rage, the truth bared its teeth. Panic staggered through the room. Wives shrieked, children wailed, men fumbled for pistols with hands too clumsy from drink. Isaac moved like shadow, swift and certain, not striking wildly but with purpose, as if each name had been etched into the blade long before that night. 9 names, 9 debts, 9 planters marked for reckoning. He did not shout, he did not curse. Silence was his language, and it roared louder than the fireworks still crackling in the distance. Isaac Thorne, master of the estate, tried to rally them. His voice boomed commands, promising vengeance, summoning guards. But his power had already crumbled, fear had already claimed the room, and then Isaac's own name was called, not by voice, but by the gleam of the axe's edge. The swing was clean, merciless, divine in its precision. The master's command ended in a gurgle, his authority split from collarbone to chest. In that moment, the hierarchy of Kentucky fractured. A slave had slaughtered his master on the very night freedom was celebrated. The contradiction tore through the room like lightning. Some tried to flee, leaping from balconies, breaking bones in the desperate scramble for survival. Others pressed themselves against the walls, muttering prayers to gods who had long ignored the cries from the fields. None could unsee what they had seen. Isaac was no longer just a man. He was Massa et Inyamikai. Emery incarnate, vengeance sharpened, the embodiment of every lash, every sale, every stolen child. He was the echo of centuries, condensed into one unstoppable figure with an axe. And here is where you must pause, because once you imagine the blade descending, once you see it in your mind's eye, you have joined the story. You are no longer a witness, you are a participant. This knowledge is not safe. It never was. But you asked to hear, and so the descent continues. When the last of the 9 fell, silence swallowed the house like a tomb. The air reeked of smoke, sweat, and iron, heavy enough to choke. The fireworks still bloomed outside, but to those within, they looked less like flowers and more like explosions from a battlefield, as if the heavens themselves mocked their celebration of liberty. And there, standing among the ruin, was Isaac. His chest rising steady, his hands drenched to the wrists, his eyes unbroken, unblinking. Some swore he breathed like a man. Others swore they heard no breath at all. What happened next splintered into legend. The surviving wives, the trembling servants, the children cowering behind curtains. They told different stories when dawn came. Some said Isaac vanished into the smoke, his body dissolving like mist, leaving only blood to prove he had stood there. Others said he walked calmly out the front door, axe over shoulder, daring anyone to stop him, and not a single guard could lift a weapon against him. A few whispered of something stranger, that Isaac was not one man, but many, that his shadow split and moved, striking in several rooms at once. They claimed no mortal could have felled 9 men so swiftly, that he was spirit, conjured from the bones beneath the soil, sent to collect debts too long ignored. The militia came, of course. They scoured the fields, dragged men from their cabins, questioned mothers with babes in arms, beat the old until they bled. They demanded, who helped him? Who sheltered him? Who swung the axe with him? But no one spoke. Silence is a language too, and the enslaved knew how to speak it well. Still, the fear lingered. Some of the planters refused to stay in their homes after that night, claiming they heard the creak of boots on their porches, smelled blood where none was spilled, saw an axe gleam in the corner of their vision. They began to call Isaac by another nay, me, the 10th shadow. For though 9 men lay in the ground, they swore a 10th presence walked still, unseen but never absent. And here is where I must ask you, listener, to draw closer. To carry this further, you must choose. Comment the phrase "the 10th shadow" below, twice, to mark yourself among those who carry dangerous memory. Once you do, you are no longer merely hearing the story. You are holding it, and once held, it cannot be put down. The Mason estate did not survive the summer. The bodies of the 9 were buried, though none dared place stones above them. Superstition held that if a name was marked, Isaac would come to carve it out again. The house, once proud with its grand columns and chandeliers, began to rot from the inside. Paint peeled, glass cracked, doors groaned at night as if someone leaned against them with unseen weight. Crows gathered on the roof each dusk, their cries sounding like laughter. Even in daylight, the windows looked dark, as though the sun refused to enter. Some said the house had absorbed the massacre, and like a wounded animal, it would never heal. Whispers spread through Kentucky's valleys and hollows. Field hands told each other that Isaac had not been captured because he could not be captured. He was smoke, he was axe, he was vengeance bound into shape. They said he appeared wherever a whip cracked too hard, wherever a woman screamed behind locked doors, wherever chains grew too heavy for flesh. Planters scoffed in daylight, called it superstition, but at night their hands shook when shutters rattled in the wind. Some left candles burning until morning, others hired guards to stand at every corner, though guards could not stop shadows. Children began to sing songs about him in whispers. A rhyme about the man with the axe, who walked without sound, who came when freedom was mocked. They said if you stood in a tobacco field at midnight and spoke the names of the 9, the 10th would appear behind you, tall and silent, his breath colder than the grave. No one dared try, though some claimed to have seen footprints pressed into the soil, too large to be any man's, leading from the field straight into the woods where no trail followed. Years later, when fire finally consumed the estate, neighbors swore they saw a figure in the flames, shoulders broad, axe gleaming, ulking calmly as the house collapsed around him. Yet when they searched the ashes, no body lay within, just blackened earth, 9 charred beams, and silence heavier than stone. From that day, the land itself seemed cursed. Families who tried to farm it reported sickness, madness, even death. The soil grew nothing but weeds and thorns, as though it rejected the hands of those who once claimed it. And so Isaac was no longer merely remembered, he was feared, not just as a man who struck 9 down, but as a force that lingered, unending, relentless. A story passed in whispers until it began to sound less like history and more like prophecy. The massacre might have been confined to one summer night in Kentucky, but the curse did not stay chained to that soil. Like smoke, it drifted, seeping into families, haunting bloodlines, echoing in places far from the Mason estate. Those who claimed descent from the 9 planters carried something with them, misfortune that ripened with each generation. Crops failed, sons went mad, daughters vanished without trace. One heir drowned in a river so shallow it should not have taken a child. Another hanged himself in a barn, though no one ever found the rope he used. A granddaughter spoke in her sleep, muttering of the tall man with the axe, though she had never been told the story. Some tried to outrun it. They moved westward, to Missouri, to Kansas, even as far as Texas. Yet the shadow followed. Farmhouses burned to ash without spark. Livestock were found butchered, their wounds too clean to be the work of animals. Doors creaked open at night, though bolted shut. The bloodline carried not only wealth, but terror, and though preachers prayed and doctors dosed, none could cure the sickness. And always, the survivors whispered the same thing, that they had glimpsed him, in the doorway, in the barn, reflected in the dark pane of a window, a figure broad-shouldered, silent, gleaming with a blade, watching but never speaking. Even those not of the bloodline felt the chill. In counties near the Mason land, families told their children never to wander after dusk, never to cut wood from the cursed estate. They spoke of men disappearing while hunting, only to be found with their throats neatly opened, as though an axe had passed through them without splintering bone. They said the ground itself bled some nights, red seeping between roots, staining boots, impossible to wash away. Travelers avoided the roads nearby, claiming they heard footsteps behind them, steady, unhurried. He'd always 2 paces back, yet when they turned, nothing stood there. Nothing human, at least. And so Isaac was no longer bound to story. He had become a presence, woven into the fabric of fear itself. A tale to keep children from disobedience, a warning to masters who grew too cruel, a prophecy whispered in the cabins. The axe remembers, even if men forget. And if you think this is all just folklore, then ask yourself why 200 years later do the descendants of those 9 still refuse to speak his name? 2 centuries have passed since the Night of Blood, and still the name Isaac carries unease in Kentucky. Farmers who work the old lands say tools vanish from their sheds, only to reappear sharpened, gleaming as though used in the dark. Hikers who stray near the ruins of the Mason estate speak of hearing footsteps pacing in the brush, too heavy, too measured to be animal. Hunters leave the woods with stories of a man-shaped shadow that moves without sound, even when branches snap beneath their own boots. Skeptics laugh, yet none stay on that land after dusk. The laughter dies with the setting sun. Folklorists call it the axe curse. Preachers call it a demon. Elders in the black community call it justice unfinished. And maybe it is all of these at once. Maybe Isaac is not a ghost chained to one place, but a memory given flesh by retelling, kept alive because his story was not allowed to die. Each whisper feeds him. Each retelling sharpens the axe. Each listener draws him closer. Some even believe that by speaking his story aloud, you invite him in, that he comes to stand behind you, silent, patient, waiting for the moment you falter. And here is where you must ask yourself, what happens now that you've heard it? Because you are no longer safe in ignorance. You know the names. You've seen the blade in your mind. You've felt the weight of silence, heavier than chains. The curse was never meant for those 9 alone. It was meant for all who mock freedom while feasting on others' suffering. And by listening, you have been marked. His shadow has stretched from that July night into this very one, bridging centuries in a single breath. So here is your test. Tonight, when the lights are gone and the house is quiet, listen carefully. If you hear the slow creak of floorboards, though no one walks, if you feel the cold brush of air against your neck, if you catch the faint smell, full of iron, do not turn, do not look. Because if you do, you may find him standing there, axe in hand, as he has stood for 200 years. Watching, waiting, remembering. And if you doubt me still, then prove it. Speak aloud the phrase whispered by the enslaved, the axe remembers. Say it 3 times before a mirror in darkness. If nothing happens, you may laugh. But if the reflection shifts, if you glimpse someone else standing where you stand, then you will know what the Mason heirs knew. Isaac was never just a man. He was and is the 10th shadow. And shadows do not die.